Hi, and welcome to Catholic Stewardship in Real Life, the Compass Catholic YouTube series. Today, we're going to be talking about millennials. Now, millennials are defined as anyone born between the years of 1981 and 1996. So as of right now, it's basically anyone between the ages of 38 and 24. Now, millennials have not only been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, but they've also been affected by the financial crisis of 2008 to 2013. To help us talk about this topic, we invited on Brendan Keating. Brendan is the CEO of Logic Commercial Real Estate, located in Nevada, and they have 90 employees between Reno and Las Vegas. He's a millennial himself and the product of a Catholic school education. He and his wife, Katie, have 4 young children. He had a lot of great information to share, and we hope you find it useful. Okay, Brendan, thank you for being here today to talk with us on this topic.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Great. So like I said in our intro, millennials, depending on which article you're reading, are usually defined between the years of 81, 82, around there, going up to, I believe it's 1996. So essentially between the ages of 24 and 38. And a lot of these millennials started their careers, and the beginning of their careers was defined by the financial crisis of 2008. I'm wondering if you can speak to the tendencies that you see in millennials, good and bad, that is a result of the financial crisis of 2008.
When I think about the stuff that millennials have had to go through, the financial times, it reminds me a bit of people that go through the Depression, our grandparents. I remember my grandma saving Ziploc bags or, reusing things that you never think of reusing. And it was because they had a previous experience that they were pulling off of the Great Depression, and they were children during that time, and seeing their families go through that made some financial scars that they never were able to get rid of. And so I think about that with the millennials as well, is that you're coming out of college either a few years before or right during the 2008 to 2013, call it, financial crisis. And so that's the norm. Millennials are post this first financial crisis are starting to reestablish themselves. They're starting to feel like they're getting ahead, and then obviously the COVID-19 situation happens. So it definitely, that generation has had a lot of turbulence between a 10 or 12-year period. And I think it changes behaviors because of that. And so if you look at home ownership, only 1 in 3 millennials own a home, and that's 8 or 9%. So 33% own a home, and that's 8 or 9% less than Generation X or baby boomers at that age. So when you look at that, 8 or 9% on 33%, that's a huge percentage difference. It's almost 25-30% of difference in home ownership. But I believe it's because of 2 things. Millennials saw a lot of friends lose homes. They lost homes themselves. And so our parents' generation always said, home ownership is like the key to your net worth. And that was always a big thought process across the United States, is you have to own a home. If you don't, that's how you kind of start your nest egg. And I think millennials saw that and could see it again if home prices come down a lot through this COVID situation, where they're just you know what, I don't need to own a home, and they're showing that. But going back to millennials as well, there are stats that came out on money.com last year that talk about how millennials actually started saving earlier than baby boomers and Generation X, and they're investing more in their retirement plans than Generation X. They're investing the same amount as baby boomers, which is 10% of into their retirement plans on average. And so you do, again, going back to, we are all creatures of habit, and what we experience is what we draw upon to make future decisions. the millennials are saving more than previous generations, or I should say just the Generation X. Um, but they're also not participating that capital into the marketplace probably as much as Generation X and baby boomers have.
So they have these tendencies that are probably due to, I'm sure, a bunch of factors, but a lot of it being the 2008 to 2013 crisis. And you had mentioned that they are more prone to saving, less home ownership. What impact do you think we're going to see from COVID-19 going forward on this population?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, it really is it depends on where you stand in the millennial age group. But, I'm right on the border of the millennial cutoff. And so I started work in 2004 and I get my career going, and then 2008 hit, and 2009 was just a very difficult year for commercial real estate. And then in 2010, we started working for banks and then kind of started going again. But so you have that you don't have this long runway where then you have an issue. But I think in another sense of it, you also don't have that much to lose during the first recession. So now let's say this goes into another recession, which I think would be very probable. And let's say it's equal or deeper than the previous recession. You're just going to have financial scars that are going to make millennials gun shy because they don't have 30 years of net worth building. They don't have the experience of how, capitalism and an entrepreneurial market can really just go for a long period of time. They could have just got that back and that risk taking back into their stomach again. And then this COVID-19 situation happens and then it's just like completely throttles back your level of wanting to take risk. But I think one important thing that I think I wanted to talk about today too was whether you're millennial, whether you're Generation X, Generation Z, or whatever the new one is, you have to live your life knowing that there's financial uncertainties. So, trying to buy the next biggest car because your neighbor bought one, or trying to move because all your friends are moving, or, that kind of stuff, the keeping up with the Joneses as they call it. That's not the smartest thing to do, because life is in the business world, and life is full of uncertainties. And unfortunately, everybody forgets about uncertainties when times are good. But then when times are bad, they're like, wow, I can't believe how uncertain the world is. This pandemic came across the world. Well, whether it's the pandemic or something else that's happening, business life and personal life are full of uncertainties. So you have to build up your reserves around you and how you are constructing your own personal balance sheet to be able to withstand storms, because storms are going to happen. And if the folks that were all in and were let greed take over fear in their business making decisions are going to be hurt a lot more than others. But in this situation, everybody's going to get hurt. Is just to what degree. But I just think as a base, if I'm teaching my children how to manage their financials, the biggest thing that I think about is watch your long-term reoccurring expenses. If you have 3 houses and 2 boats and all these expenses you can't cut in the downturn, you're going to be in some pain. And if you construct your balance sheet and your living expenses to the point where you feel like you have comfort in there, and it takes discipline, it takes focusing on what's important, and to withstand that. But there is going to be another financial downturn in millennials work lives, and so they just really have to be defensive. Really at all times. I've always thought that the best investors I've ever been around have been defensive at all times. They tend to go heavy when people are scared, which, they get greedy when people are scared, and scared when people are greedy. But you do generally, as soon as the switch goes back to greed, from fear. You need to just be defensive.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Being defensive in terms of having an emergency fund and keeping your monthly expenses in a reasonable amount. And we're going to be doing our next Catholic Stewardship in Real Life. We'll be talking with someone who is living on one income, even though they have two incomes. So should that second income go away, they know that they can still make all their monthly bills. So that's a really good point. I appreciate how you said that. So going forward then, what can millennials do? What steps can they take to weather this storm? And then after this storm is over, what should they do and how should they arrange their personal financial habits to be defensive in the long term?
Yeah, so two things I think about is when somebody is consuming above their means, I think it's important that millennials be mindful enough to know what is driving that consumption. So I think so many times people are just flying by the seat of their pants. They're not really focusing on what is driving decision making. But is it the fact that your friend got a car on social media, now you want to get a car, they got a new house, and we don't have social media, so we thankfully only know what our own family and very, very close friends are doing. So I think it's important. I think the most important thing is thinking about what's driving those expenses. We all want nice things, and we all want nicer things than we had before. But when you think about it in the sense of how Warren Buffett says, when you're risking something for something you don't need, that's when it gets scary. And that happens in personal life and it happens in business life. So in personal life, you want to buy a big boat because your family likes boating. Well, maybe it was smarter to rent that boat and for the times you're going to use it. But then on the business sense of risking what you already have for what you don't need is the way Buffett says it. It's I'm taking a ton of debt because I want to go open my third sandwich shop. I have two sandwich shops that are doing fine. And if I waited another year, I'd have enough cash to do it with cash instead of debt, or to do it in a very low leverage way. Then wait the year because you have two sandwich shops that are doing just fine right now. I think that in the social media world, there's so much of the trying to keep up with others that it makes people, especially in the millennial generation who are forming who they are in these years, it makes them take bad business risks because they're trying to keep up. And I'm speaking in very much broad strokes. There's obviously that's not the case for every single millennial.
Going back to what you said earlier, keeping your expenses low, being aware of your priorities, and then questioning your financial decisions in terms of what's important to me, which hopefully as Catholics, it's keeping in mind that we are stewards of our money, that the Lord actually owns everything, and we are called to be faithful financial stewards. So I appreciate your professional interpretation on what we try and teach, which is stewardship in all things, and keeping our expenses low and not getting ourselves in a position where debt becomes our master. We can, focus on what's important, which is our blessings, our family, and, the different gifts that we have to share with this world. So
you do also need millennials to be active participants in this $22 trillion economy. So if they get so scared from the 2008, 2012 recession and now the 2022 till 2000 whatever COVID situation, and they just save their money and bury it under the tree, that's not very good either. You need to have them have the confidence to go buy a home, go buy a car within reason when it makes financial sense for them, to invest in public securities, because those are the things that are really going to help millennials keep up with inflation. And when you look at, this whole situation right now could produce I've read things that say as high as $10 trillion of new debt for the United States. We could be entering a very high inflationary period where you do need to keep active investments. You can't just sit in cash that would be getting devalued. And then that creates a lot more systematic issues as millennials go to retire and don't have enough money for retirement. Then the government tries to support them. So it is a interesting balance. As I mentioned before, you have to be watchful of your balance sheet first, but two, you have to still take risks in this world but they just have to be calculated risk, and you have to feel that the return is worth the risk you're taking.
Wow, great information. So thank you for that.
And thank you for joining us for this Compass Catholic in Real Life series. Next week, we'll be talking to a couple that has learned to live on one income. And I know a lot of other couples are going to be navigating the same thing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So like, subscribe. We hope you enjoyed this and have a great one. God bless.